You think you can just walk away from this, Julian?
After everything?
Evelyn, keep your voice down. This isn't the place.
The international terminal was a symphony of chaos, each instrument playing its own anxious tune. The frantic clatter of rolling suitcases, the polyglot murmur of 1,000 conversations, and the disembodied, echoing announcements of delays and gate changes all blended into a single, stressful hum. Yet, amidst this whirling sea of humanity, one man sat as an island of perfect calm. Mr. Julian Reed was tucked away in a quiet corner, his focus entirely consumed by the intricate web of lines and numbers on his tablet. Dressed in a simple black, merino wool sweater and dark, comfortable trousers, he exuded a quiet confidence that needed no announcement. He was a man at peace, an anomaly in a place defined by hurry. That peace was shattered by a voice as sharp and unpleasant as breaking glass. "This is utterly ridiculous. Do you have any idea how much I paid for my ticket?" Ms. Evelyn Davenport, a woman who wore her wealth like armor, was berating a young gate agent. Her designer logos were a constellation of status, her jewelry catching the harsh terminal light as she gestured wildly. The flight was already 20 minutes delayed, and in Evelyn's world, this was a personal and unforgivable insult. Finally, the boarding call for first class crackled over the PA system. Julian carefully placed his tablet in his leather carry-on, zipped it shut, and made his way to the priority lane. He stood patiently, his ticket ready. Just as he stepped forward, Evelyn Davenport swept past him, a blur of perfume and indignation. She thrust her passport and boarding pass into the agent's hand, not even acknowledging Julian's presence. But as the agent processed her ticket, Evelyn cast a disdainful, head-to-toe glance over her shoulder at Julian. The look was clear and deeply insulting. "You don't belong here." Julian's expression didn't change, but his eyes, for a moment, held a glint of profound disappointment before he simply waited his turn. The first-class cabin was a sanctuary of muted tones and hushed efficiency. Julian found his seat, 1A, a spacious pod by the window. He settled in, the chaos of the terminal already a fading memory. The long transatlantic flight was a gift of rare, uninterrupted block of time to finalize the schematics for a revolutionary new engine design. He was just about to retrieve his tablet when the same grating voice from the gate echoed through the quiet cabin. "Excuse me," Evelyn Davenport said, her voice ringing with disbelief. She stood in the aisle, her hand on her hip, glaring down at him. "I believe you're in my seat." Julian looked up from his comfortable recline, his calm unwavering. "Good afternoon. I believe my ticket is for seat 1A, he said, his tone polite and even. Evelyn scoffed, a sound of pure derision. "That's simply impossible. There must be a mistake." Without even asking to see his ticket, she snapped her fingers imperiously. "Flight attendant." A young man with a nervous energy and a name tag that read Marco scurried over. "Yes, ma'am? Is there a problem?" "Yes, there's a problem," Evelyn snapped, pointing a manicured finger at Julian. "This man is in my seat. I demand you move him." Asterisk intimidated by her aggression, Marco turned to Julian with an apologetic wince. "Sir, may I please see your boarding pass?" Julian complied without a word, handing over the ticket. Marco examined it and then looked at Evelyn's. His face fell. "Ma'am," he said timidly, "this passenger is in the correct seat. 1A, your ticket is for seat to be, just across the aisle." Evelyn snatched her ticket from his hand, glancing at it for the first time. For a split second, a flicker of embarrassment crossed her face, but it was instantly replaced by a renewed wave of indignation. "This is unacceptable. They must have downgraded me without notice. I am platinum level flyer. I want to speak to your supervisor. This is not over." She glared at Julian, her voice laced with venom. "I can't imagine how some people get these kinds of undeserved perks." Evelyn Davenport had become a human roadblock. She stood firm in the aisle, refusing to move to her assigned seat, a furious statue holding the entire aircraft hostage. Boarding was complete. The cabin doors were sealed, but she would not sit down. Her voice, a relentless drill of complaint, filled the tense silence. "I pay thousands for these tickets. This is an outrage." Marco's gentle pleas were swatted away like flies. A senior flight attendant, a woman with a kind but weary face, attempted to intervene, but Evelyn simply talked over her, her demands growing more shrill. "Get me the captain. I want him out here now." The other first-class passengers shifted uncomfortably, their quiet sanctuary transformed into a stage for a one-woman show of entitlement. The delay stretched from minutes to a significant hold, the entire plane waiting on the whims of a single, furious passenger. Suddenly, the captain's voice, laced with steel, filled the cabin. "Cabin crew, please prepare for immediate departure. All passengers must be seated for the safety of this flight." It was a clear, final warning. Evelyn, however, seemed to believe it didn't apply to her. She crossed her arms defiantly. This plane isn't going anywhere until I get the seat I paid for. It was at that precise moment of peak tension that a new sound cut through the drama. It wasn't a familiar chime or a standard alert. It was a piercing, high-frequency shriek that emanated directly from the cockpit, a sound of pure electronic agony. A small, angry red light began to flash on the main control panel, visible through the ajar cockpit door. The atmosphere in the cabin instantly shifted from social discomfort to a cold, primal fear. Evelyn's tirade died in her throat, her face paling to a chalky white. The murmurings in the cabin became hushed whispers of genuine panic. Through the cockpit door, the flight crew could be seen scrambling. The first officer was running frantic diagnostics, his face a mask of stress. The pilot, Captain Eva Rostova, a legend in the airline for her cool head, was on the radio. Her voice tight and strained. It was an error code they had never seen. A critical system failure with no known cause or solution. From his seat, Julian Reed's head snapped up. The calm observer was gone, replaced by a man of intense, laser-like focus. His eyes were fixed on the flashing light, his brow furrowed in concentration. He didn't hear the passengers' worried whispers. He heard the specific cadence and pitch of the alarm. He knew that sound. With a decisive movement, he unbuckled his seatbelt, stood up, and began to walk purposefully toward the front of the plane. Marco, his training kicking in, rushed to intercept him. "Sir, you must remain seated. For your safety, please sit down now." Julian didn't break his stride. He looked past the young flight attendant, his gaze locking with the senior crew member who was now standing near the cockpit door. He spoke with a quiet, unshakable authority that cut through the fear in the cabin. "That's a cascade failure in the primary avionics bus. It's a software glitch in the new guidance package. I need to speak to the captain." He paused, then delivered the final, unbelievable blow. "I designed it." A stunned silence fell over the front of the plane. Marco froze, his mouth agape from the aisle. Evelyn Davenport let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Oh, for heaven's sake. Now you're a rocket scientist?" But Captain Rostova, hearing Julian's precise technical language and seeing the absolute, unwavering certainty in his eyes, made a split-second decision that would define her career. Over the frantic protest of her first officer, her voice rang out from the cockpit, sharp and clear. "Let him in." The crew parted as Julian stepped into the cockpit. The air was thick with tension. He didn't reach for a single control. Instead, he absorbed the flashing screens and chaotic data streams in an instant. "What diagnostics have you run?" he asked, his voice a low, commanding hum. The stressed first officer quickly listed the protocols they'd followed. Julian nodded, his mind clearly working faster than the failing computers. "The error code is a ghost," he stated. "It's a feedback loop from the auxiliary processor. The system thinks it's failing, so it's shutting itself down." He pointed to a small, secondary control panel below the main console. "You need to manually reset the AP and force a system reinitialization. Use command sequence Delta 773 Bravo now." The first officer looked at his captain, his expression a mixture of doubt and desperation. Captain Rostova, trusting her gut, gave him a sharp, definitive nod. With trembling fingers, he keyed in the command sequence. The result was instantaneous. An absolute. The horrifying shriek cut out. The angry red light vanished. The frantic data streams on the screen stabilized, resolving into neat, orderly lines of green text. The cockpit was plunged into a sudden, deafening silence. Captain Rostova stared at her main console, where every system now glowed with a healthy, operational green light. She let out a slow, shaky breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She turned to the calm man standing beside her, her face a mask of pure awe and profound relief. "Who in the hell are you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Julian Reed," he replied, as calmly as if he were introducing himself at a dinner party. "My company, Reed Aerospace, supplied your entire avionics suite. I led the design team, Captain." Rostova personally escorted a still-stunned Julian Reed back to his seat. Before he sat, she leaned in, her voice low but firm enough for those nearby to hear. "Mr. Reed," she said, her gratitude palpable, "you didn't just prevent a turnback in a PR disaster. That was a critical failure." Captain Rostova just saved this aircraft and walked directly to where now rambling Evelyn Davenport was. She gave his hand a firm, to shrink into respectful shake. The captain's voice was no longer quiet. It was ice-cold, sharp, and carried through the silent cabin. "Ma'am," she began, her eyes like chips of granite, "your behavior on this flight was not only unacceptable, it was dangerous. You chose to harass a passenger and willfully interfere with the flight crew while we were dealing with a potential safety emergency." She didn't raise her voice, but its intensity made everyone flinch. We have a zero-tolerance policy for such actions. This aircraft is returning to the gate, where you will be met by security and removed from this flight." Evelyn sat, for the first time, completely and utterly speechless. Her face, stripped of its arrogance, was just a pale, frightened mask. She was escorted off the plane by ground security without another word, her designer bags trailing behind her like a sad, forgotten parade. The flight departed 20 minutes later. As the plane finally ascended into the calm, blue expanse of the sky, Julian Reed leaned back in his seat. 1A. He took a deep breath, retrieved his tablet, and with a quiet click, reopened the schematics for his new engine. The true first class citizen wasn't the one with the loudest voice or the flashiest labels, but the one whose value was measured in character, competence, and the quiet dignity of respect.